Thank you for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
Well, that's exactly what I wanted to touch on next. So I'm really glad that the conversation has kind of taken the turn that it has regarding social media. And I want to get Sara back in here because I know that she has that really cool Facebook group that I did join. And I see you posting. So what I want to talk about then is the importance of making content online. What are the upsides? What are the downsides? And I want to bring this up, not necessarily not as a defense per se, because even trainers are like, there's balanced trainers, and then there's I don't even necessarily think you're wrong to say that some should rebrand, because they're very much boiled down, super simplified, and they know they're fine with it, they're aware of it. An example, he's a friend of ours, right? So Sean O'Shea, the good dog, you've seen that guy on YouTube, with the e-collar stuff and the reactive dogs and all that good stuff. It's super simple. We love Sean, we've had him on, so don't take this the wrong way, Sean, but just the obedience factor, the drills, the repetition for a lot of stuff isn't necessarily the focus of training. Pretty much all of it is centered around state of mind stuff, relaxing the dog, getting the owner to a place to where they can control the overexcitable or aroused or reactive dog. And so the training is simple. It works from what I've seen. I mean, they've got a good following and all that good stuff, and that's all good. But two things can be true at once, right? Whereas Michael Ellis can work on kick-ass obedience commands and slow dogs down.
Yeah, it kind of breaks things into its realms, right? It's the obedience, the behavior, the relationship stuff.
But I brought that up for a reason, which was there are a few trainers like that come to mind. It's not just the good dog. They're fully aware of it. They're totally fine with it, and so is their audience. It's catering to a very specific niche in the dog world. And I think that's valuable, just like it's valuable for people to do the really broad spectrum stuff. There's 14 billion videos on YouTube of let me show you how to condition your puppy to walk in and out of a crate with food, right? So, I like that all these different things exist. And what I wanted to get to was what Denise and Sara, in your opinions, are the upsides and the downsides of modern day dog training in regards to social media.
Oh man. I know Denise shares quite a bit differently than I do on social media. And I think social media gives us so many amazing tools as far as continuing our own education and growing as dog trainers. And I see it right now being such a big divide in that regard. And that's why I love going on your guys' podcast and talking with you and helping to bridge that gap and really reach across and learn from other trainers that I wouldn't necessarily be learning from anyway. And I owe all that to social media, right? It's so easy just to go on, find somebody, watch their content, whether it's on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram.
I think
wherever.
It was you that said that. Yeah, you could go on someone's social media, watch their stuff, and not tell anyone in your club about it. You can go wherever you want, watch it. Denise said that exact same thing this afternoon. Nice. You can go watch and learn without any problems, and that's such a huge thing. I can learn from somebody that I don't want to admit I'm learning from, no problem. So I think that that's such a huge asset with social media. I tend to not share on my own personal page how I get places, and it's just because I have a hard time dealing with the extra comments. And so for that reason, I'm passing over to Denise because she is a rock star at this and she shares everything. Thanks for that, Sara.
Yeah, I think when I got on social media, many odd years ago, somebody said to me, it's actually Linda Black, and I know that Sara knows Linda, so I'm going to mention her name. I was at a seminar in Texas, and Linda said, why don't you ever talk about anything personal on social media? I don't know anything about your family. I don't know anything about your kids, nothing. I just see pictures of your dogs. And I I had to think that through, because Sara's going, what? This is so not you. But back then I was kind of in that, so I'm 51. So I was kind of in that phase when to be professional was to be distant. And so the personal professional split, you had the people who were the professionals, and you intentionally kept a degree of distance because it was to be a professional. And so she said that, and I thought, oh, so like horrible things won't happen because I'm a very personal person. I'm not a professional person. I'm personal. You mean nothing terrible will happen if I put up a picture of my kid or tell a story? And so I started to do it, and quite the reverse. People were like, wow, because as we all know, in this modern age, it's all personal. It's relationship. It's open and listening and interacting. And that kind of distant guru thing day is gone. You know, people don't want that now. And it just happens to fit my personality. And so as the years went by, I got more and more free with it. And now I'm actually on the far extreme edge of, I share everything. And it's dogs, it's people, it's it's Cancer Awareness Month. Go do this thing. I do whatever I want. And I do a lot of my video training live. So I just turn on the video camera, and for 6 weeks, I train my puppy every day from 8 weeks on. This is how I'm doing it. This is what it looks like. And take it or leave it. And, you know, and it's very hard to do that. You're really putting yourself out there because in real time, things come up. But that stress on me made me a much better trainer because it made me very aware of my choices when I train in real time and I know you're watching. And it also made me much more able to show people it's okay if it goes wrong. And as often as not, I'm like, I never want to see that again, but I need time to think about it. So I'm not even going to touch it, which is what I would actually do in real life. I would just walk away from it. So people got to see that. And I got addicted to the responses from people, which basically said, you are changing my dog training. You are changing how I think. Your mistakes, your normalness is allowing me to thrive. And I just took so much from that. And I get a lot of heat for it, really. But the way I look at it is that's not bad. I figure that percentage who can't accept what I do and how I do it, and I do things that are pretty far off the edge. They're not even in the positive reinforcement. They're just weird and different because I don't care if I get it wrong. I'll come back. And what I've realized is it's actually to my benefit to curate a social media presence that doesn't appreciate that because they'll leave. And then what it pulls in are people who we don't have to agree on everything. Yeah. We don't have to see all things the same way, but we have to have a way of thinking, which is open. Now, where we go with that is neither here nor there. I can be friends with people who think quite differently, but the ability we need to share common facts. That's sort of important to me. You got to start with some common facts about how things work. But from there, our life experiences are different. So for me, social media has really been an extension of what I care about, which is education. And being vulnerable and showing people that even good trainers struggle. It's not this beautiful finished product. And when I first came to Instagram, I said to myself, Instagram's going to be I'm a kick-ass trainer platform. So I would put up these 1 minute flashy, really cool stuff. No collar on the dog, nothing. The dogs go out naked. Because I was making a point, a presence, but that's not who I am. It's like, I can't sustain this because I have no love of this. I mean, it's nice to put the stuff up, but it's who I am is those lives. It's talking for an hour. It's answering people's questions. It's staying even keeled and just giving people things to think about. It's the responses I get. It's the private notes from people saying, I just never really thought about that. And I'm going to try what you said. It never occurred to me to try something like that. That's awesome. That to me is worth everything right there.
Right. Because it connects you to people.
Yeah, it does. And I'm not trying to change people. I'm not trying to take their things. I'm trying to make them the best self they can be with the information they have. It just so happens, I think that brings them to my way of thinking. And so that's obviously, whether I like it or not, there's always that lower level want to pull people to your way. But I think I am a kind person. I think I am a good person. I would like to pull people to that way of thinking. And social media has allowed me to do that in a way before social media, because I was from that era. There was no possibility of that kind of relaxed, interactive education.
You know what I find interesting, Denise, is it's surprisingly difficult, regardless of like methodology and training and all that good stuff. It's surprisingly difficult to find people who are willing to just put out information or put out like raw training footage, whether it went well or it didn't or whatever the case. And so it's refreshing and it's fun. But at the same time, I have to give you props because you're the only of all the dog trainers we've had on the podcast, you're the only one so far who openly admits to like catching flack on social media without necessarily letting it get to you to the point that you've considered like shutting down your accounts. everybody from Michael Ellis to Tyler Muto to like all these big names, like Tommy Davis, who's really successful on YouTube and probably Instagram and everything else as well. I tell everybody the same thing, which I can't really tell you because you don't have this problem, is I'm not amazed. I'm not surprised that everybody's got their 2 cents online. I mean, go figure on that one, right? Mm-hmm. I'm amazed that it almost worked. Yeah. You know, I'm kind of shocked by that, you know, so it's fun to hear that, you know, you're like, you're able to understand and just kind of let it roll and let things be as they are. And you're just doing your work with your dog as you see fit, which fuck it, it's your Instagram. Right. And so definitely it's nice.
Yeah.
I think starting to understand where people were coming from, the fear and the insecurity Sara was talking about, when I run off in a really bizarre direction and it is counter to how most people are doing it in my world, I recognize that a lot of their struggle is that I'm not challenging them on purpose, but the feeling to them is that I'm challenging them and saying my way is better. I'm not. I'm saying this is an interesting direction for me to explore. And could you just support me? And if you can't, that's okay. But could you not do it on my wall? And I think the thing that has saved my soul, because I do have those days where I'm like, what is the matter with people? Is the sheer quantity of people who back me up and say, you know what? She has the right to try. And we might benefit hugely or not. Let it be. And I find that I don't defend myself very much. People tend to do it for me.
That's awesome.
And that's what I mean by you're curating people who hang out with you, who recognize your way of thinking, who value that, and who are actually scared of losing it. So if they think I might stop doing it, then they're kind of freaked out because they're benefiting and they don't want me to stop. And so they step up. And I actually find that hugely appreciated and beneficial, but I do recognize the fear factor that comes into play when you, like in the balanced world, socialization is often viewed as exposure to things, but not necessarily interaction with them.
I teach interaction, yeah.
Okay, well, in the force-free world, that's kind of a crazy thought. Like in the force-free world, the dog must interact, must use food. I mean, they've got checklists and rules, and I actually am closer to the balance side. I really think that socialization is just getting the dog out, but the dog doesn't have to go up to the dogs, doesn't have to see the dog has to become comfortable in the environment. I'm not extreme about it. I'm not like, don't go. I'm very relaxed and I don't use a lot of food with it. And I remember when I first brought this up, I was attacked so hard by my own community. And I kept thinking, but why do you care so much? I'm not harming you. I'm simply giving an opinion. And they were so angry. And like, now I get it because it was threatening for them a pillar. Well, a week ago on TikTok, somebody asked about structured walks. Look, I've never heard this term. This is not a term in the force-free world. I didn't know what a structured walk was. So I said, do you mean like just having the dog heel with you or something? And somebody said, yeah. And I said, yeah, I don't really do that. You know, I think most dogs have a shitty life. And when they finally get out the door, I want them to just go out and be a dog. Oh my God, 150,000 people have seen that video.
That's triggering for a lot of balance training.
Oh, I had no idea. The things they said to me, they were so mean. Now, when you get mean, I don't care because then I just start observing you and just wondering what's making you that way.
Right.
But I've never seen anything so mean. But you know who defended me was the balance trainers. They came back and they said, don't mess with her. She's the good guy. She's not hurting you. She's expressing an opinion. And I didn't say anything bad about structured walks. I said why I let my dogs do sniffing walks. But the sheer overreaction, like we have our cows, you know, these sacred cows. The thing is, I need to know who they are. Like, I don't really mind slaughtering the occasional cow. I just need to know it is a sacred cow. So I don't go in blindsided, but the intensity of the reaction was really kind of shocking to me.
Yeah.
And we all do it, both sides.
Yeah, everyone does. And I guess I want to go into a question that we normally ask at the end of an episode, but something that you were saying right before this triggered it in my head. So I want to ask you here and tell me. So we always talk about kind of dog training as art, because I do want to get into all the hot topics, right? I think that's going to be part 2 of this episode. But I want to ask you, we talk about dog training as art, right? And kind of getting to know you and getting to see you and get to see how you're talking. You know, you try different things, you're creative with things that are not necessarily in any particular format, and you think outside the box regularly. That ultimately is art, right? There is a certain level of being an artist to dog training. And so anyone we've asked, all of our special guests, including Sara Brueske, who had a dope ass answer.
Oh, the pressure.
Oh yeah. So you got to beat Sara.
It's okay. I don't even remember what I said at this point. So every time they say that, I have no idea.
It was dope. I remember it was dope. But the question is this, is if dog training is art and you see yourself as an artist, what is a tool, metaphoric tool, that you have in your toolbox that allows you to be the best artist that you can be?
I empathize with the dog. I think probably the number one thing I do is I say to myself, if I was the dog and this is what was happening, would I be able to learn? Would I understand? Would I want to play your game? And I'm looking at that dog. If I was staring at the ground like that, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. If I'm staring up and I'm perked up, what does that mean? I really do almost literally put myself in the position of the dog based on what I see. And then I often can clarify a training problem from that point of view. Mm-hmm. So I think it's almost an empathetic to the point of, you're not allowed to do this, by the way. Like you learn that in middle school when you're a little kid, that animals are not humans, are humans. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, that's so bizarre. Mm-hmm. Humans are animals. So exactly. Why wouldn't we assume that dogs think, feel, we know they have very similar brain structures.
Right.
And I take that almost to an extreme. That's why if you've listened to some of my lives, you are aware that I do that. I just put myself, I say, well, your dog is afraid. So how would you feel if you were chased by a lion? And then we just go through possibilities. Somebody's trying to feed me while I'm running. Somebody wants to offer me a game of chess while I'm running. Somebody says, it's a hologram, not really a lion. Oh, like, what do you have to do to connect with me, a human? And now, how does that apply to the dog? Analogies work unbelievably well, not only when I'm talking to humans, but when I'm looking at my own dog. If I were you, where would I be right now? And I do that if I'm struggling, or I go find somebody to talk to who then tells me what I should have been able to figure out for myself. But, you said you're in it and you can't. Right. So I think that's probably the thing I do that gives me an advantage in my own training.
It's kind of like not a role reversal, but it's when you put yourself in their shoes a little bit,
It's a different perspective. I think that's really valuable.
Yeah. And I think that it also, to be clarified, because anything can be, any good advice can be taken to an extreme and then perverted, to empathize with the dog doesn't necessarily mean projecting, right? Or necessarily, but to genuinely put yourself in the shoes and relate to, and all those things is awesome, is awesome. But it can be taken,
but
people anthropomorphize all the time.
Yeah, but people can spin literally anything in the world, right? So I think it just sounds like you just look at the dog and you really try your best to come up with what just trying to understand the dog, right? I wouldn't even necessarily say it's like projecting or anything like that. It's just what are you thinking? You tell me, show me. Yeah. I think that's one of the biggest things that trainers don't do, regardless of methodology and fence or whatever, I've seen trainers on all sides who they don't just watch the dog, Yeah, totally.
You really have to, I think, studying body language. If you're going to learn one thing, don't learn the quadrants, don't learn learning theory. Learn what a dog is feeling by watching that body language.
The nonverbals.
And you got to know it in context, because everything lip licking after the dog eats is different.
Right.
But understanding dog body language, I think, is
huge.
Everything.
Yeah.
And that's actually where I would start.
Go ahead.
Sorry, that's such a huge thing. In my daily dog training, like how many times am I actually thinking about the quadrants that I'm using or what learning theory I'm using? I'm thinking about what is that dog feeling and what is their body telling me in that moment, and what are the reactions telling me? And that's such a huge deal. We get so stuck in these stupid quadrants and all these explanations. The only time I ever use that stuff is to defend myself against, to another dog trainer. It's never actually what I'm thinking of in the moment when I'm training dogs.
Right. 100%. No, 100%. I think, I was fortunate enough to grow up in a daycare setting, right, as a dog trainer. So getting to see 30, 40 dogs every single day doing dog stuff helped just kind of fine tune that Rosetta Stone in my head, That's awesome. So I want to get into let's get into the big stuff. I guess let's get into the disagreeableness. All the things we disagree on. I don't know necessarily how to format this, but I do want to have a back and forth and talk about it, because obviously good ideas can get perverted and people can, swing all the way to the left or all the way to the right. And all of this controversy, let's have a couple ground rules. Like, all dog trainers like dogs, right? Like, we all love dogs.
Hope so.
This is number one, right? And we all want to help.
Wait, what? We're supposed to like dogs?
What?
That's a thing?
Yeah.
What?
Shit, I'm in the wrong profession.
I was in it for the money, man. So all dog trainers like dogs. All dog trainers want to help, right? In some way, shape, or form, each other or the humans. There's always that interesting dog trainer that goes like, I got into the dog business because I hate humans. And then you're like, you won't be around for a while.
Yeah.
See you later.
Sorry to break it to you, but
So we like helping people and we like helping dogs, right? And we love dogs. What else is a common ground?
Here's one that I find to be very, very true in dog training.
Mm-hmm.
People gravitate toward the type of methodology and teaching style and all that good stuff that resonates with them as a person. And the better you get in the profession, then you can branch out further.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But you start with what's comfortable, with what's familiar, with what's
Yes, and I would even take that a little bit further. This is more diving into stuff of yes, what our personalities are like. And I can see that even through my, because I started training when I was 18. When I was a young, insecure teenager, well, compulsion made complete sense because it was the only thing that gave me power, right? And then when I got older, well, now it was competition stuff because I needed to be better than them, right? So the competition work and the more complex, food work made more sense to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then as my heart started developing, mid-20s, and I started becoming more emotionally intelligent, I was like, yeah, those dogs are not turning out the way I want them to turn out. And, I'm demoing dogs with their heads down, So being able to kind of grow through that process where I was in my growth process, and we talk about this with a lot of people, how your personal growth can change your perspectives in dog training. What I was going to say is what I think creates the divide, and this is just a theory I had, is our relationship to control, and however that was developed, whether it be in childhood or societal or religious, whatever it was, but what our relationship to control was. I know that there are people, like, for example, when I was younger, very structured, but I feel that I benefited from it. So I understood, okay, controlling an animal is going to benefit them, right? Then there are some people who have negative associations to being controlled, maybe bad parenting, bad upbringing, bad environment, whatever it is. And they may have told themselves, fuck that shit. Fuck that shit. What is your guys' perspective on what is it that you think that is creating, it starts with the mentality and personality of people, but what is it do you think that is creating this divide on a very core level? And it may not be a single answer either.
I'm going to go back to the lack of confidence thing that creates the divide at the core level, because as you guys have already mentioned, the black belts, right? The black belt dog trainers are the ones that are looking and asking questions and starting the conversations, and they're the ones that are reaching across that divide, and they're the ones that generally have that more confidence in their ability to train and utilize different methods and their methods and everything else along those lines. And I think the ones that are happy to sit across the gap and not reach across are ones that just haven't quite reached that level yet. So they're still happy just in their method. They're not curious about others. They're set that theirs is the best one, is going to work, and that sort of thing. So I think confidence plays a huge role in that. As far as what you said about the control thing, that's really, really interesting. And I'm thinking about like my own emotional journey with that. Control has always been something that like I need to have in my life. Like I always have to control everything that's around me. And as I've gotten older and more confident in my life, that control, that need to control things has just slipped away little by little by little. And it, you know, it was just little things at first, but now it's kind of the same in my dog training. Like I used to be like, my way works. My way is good. I don't need to learn about other ways. Like my way is set. I don't care if anybody else does my way, but like my way is my way. And then as I've gotten more confident in that and in my life in general, that's kind of gone away. Now I'm more excited to experiment. I'm more willing to ask questions and get that input on my dogs and on my training itself. So I think really confidence, you know, whether that's in your own life or maybe in your dog training, is a huge deal. I'm just going to use that for all my answers for all the questions.
Yeah. Confidence. It's confidence. No, I like that. I'm going to write things down because I want this to come back full circle.
There's a few things in here. I feel like I'm in a therapy session actually, because now I'm like thinking back to my childhood and where that may have taken me in terms of structure and the like. And a few things come to mind. I'm the opposite of Sarah. Like I don't control anything. It makes me a great boss because I'm like out of your face. I need to just get the, you know, I get your job done. You know your job. Tell me if you have a problem. But I'm very hands off, and I'm super comfortable turning over control. And I'm like that with my dogs. I don't think they're out of control. I don't think they're badly behaved. But I have a low, like they don't get crated very much. I tend to have a fairly free household. And it's interesting because one of the things that's been a struggle for me is recognizing that my young dog requires nonstop control to function. He must be told every single second, because my rule is choice when there's no wrong choice, structure otherwise. Like you don't let a dog have a choice if there might be a wrong choice, because that could be dangerous or whatever. So that's my rule. But with Dice, I've learned there's never a right. He never makes a good choice. I have to make all of his choices. If I say, okay, then he runs around the yard doing bad things. And then once he starts doing like collecting all the toys, the next thing he's going after the squirrels and that. And it's actually been hard for me to accept the fact that he has a place command. My other dogs don't have a place command, and I use it. He is penned or crated for long stretches of time, not because of housebreaking or chewing, but because he can't settle himself down. He does agitated behaviors. He's anxious. And I hate that I have to control him for his own good. But, you know, we are individuals, right? And my other dogs don't require that structure to be successful in life. He can't go for a walk on the street because he would be chasing the cars, chasing the leaves, chasing the bugs, chasing the people. He's horrible, you know? And so every moment of his life is under structure. And it never even occurred to me that because I mentioned to Sarah earlier how uncomfortable it makes me that I have to, I'm coming to terms with how this is not how I normally train. I normally train with tons of choice and let the dog get to me eventually. But with him, all I find with tons of choice is that he gets more and more disconnected.
More distant. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I've had to change my own comfort zone to accommodate this dog way beyond anything I'd ever expected, because he's extreme and I'm extreme. It'll be okay, but it is a process. One of the things I do think is a real struggle, and it relates to the same thing, much of the positive reinforcement community is sensitive, for lack of a better word. They are sensitive people. They are sensitive to watching suffering around them. They have often had their own share of trauma in their own lives. They are sensitive to anger, pain. They are a sensitive group of individuals.
Right.
And they genuinely, in their heart, believe
it's a temperament
watching.
Thing. Yeah.
Yes. And they believe dogs are being abused. And it's not a logical conversation anymore. It's not a matter of saying, well, let's look at the dogs. Let's look at the body language. They are so vested in what they feel is the suffering of the dog. And it can be even minor compulsion. No, there is I don't know if you know, Punishment and Coercion and its Fallout. Murray is the author. This
study.
It's a book, but that all punishment does have an effect on people that it's being applied to. And there's fallout is what they call it. And while I have no problem accepting that, I also believe that in life, all of us experience punishment and seem to manage. So I don't know, maybe we could have truly unbelievable existences if nobody had ever stopped anything and had structured our environment so that no never came up. I don't know. I don't know what's perfect out there. I would say that when I see a dog, I really do look at the dog. So if a dog is walking down the street on a prong collar, I look at the dog. If the dog's head is down and he's walking along and he's not enjoying his walk, I feel sad. But it's not the equipment that makes me feel sad. It's the life of that dog. And when I see another dog, tail up, wagging out front.
With the prong collar.
With the prong collar.
Yeah.
I feel happy because the dog is out of its house.
Yes.
The problem with seeing it as a matter of abuse is if an animal is being abused, then therefore the dog is better off never leaving its house than being subjected to the abuse of the walk. And if you think in terms of abuse, then you cannot really internalize that the dog might be opting in. If you ask the dog, that the dog could be opting in. And I think this is a real root of frustration when the two groups talk to each other. Because logically, if you put an e-collar on a dog and it means they can go for a 2-hour off-leash hike in the woods with their owner safely, logically, it's very hard to argue against that, in my opinion. I do not choose to use e-collars on my dogs to get them to walk in the woods. I choose alternative ways of getting there, but not because I think it's abusive to use these kind of modern low stimulation methods of training.
Right.
I have all sorts of reasons why my history, I definitely used e-collars, and I used them on the highest level because they came out of the box, and I did what I suspect 90% of the population does. And that's where I have issues with e-collars.
Yes.
It's not these hyper sophisticated users. It's the fact that I believe the majority of people are abusive with them, whether they mean to be or not.
Right.
And I don't think that's reasonable that at our stage of education, where we are in this country as dog trainers, I just don't feel that having them at Petco is okay. But not because I think they are inherently abusive devices. And I think I strongly disagree with much of my force feed community on that line. I do not believe that putting a slip collar on a dog or a Frank clip harness or a head halter, I think these are choices. And I have seen dogs that, in my opinion, found a head halter more aversive than a prong. But that doesn't mean it doesn't mean I'm going to put a prong on the dog, because I might have other interests. I might want to keep arousal down in that dog. There could be a million things. But in my community, I think head halters and Frank clip harnesses are considered the more acceptable aversives. And in your community, the prongs and the slips. But at the end of the day, that's a little strange that we don't comfortably go over to the other side and just take what's best for the dog. Like, it is very rare for me to see a balance trainer recommend a Frank clip harness. And yet they're exceptionally effective at walking the vast majority of dogs with no more fall. It's just done. It's just like putting a prong collar, but it's not your culture. And well, if I have a 90-year-old woman show up with a working line German Shepherd, I could tell you a prong collar probably makes some kind of sense, or a head halter, but in my culture, I would not recommend that. But not because of the logic, but because of the culture that's developed around the tools and the words that we use when we talk about the tools, the myths that we have developed around why this is a cruel tool and this is a fine tool, even though looking at the dog, by all accounts, the dog doesn't agree. Both sides do this, and so I do think that and when people are calling you an animal abuser, and again, we're talking 5%, you got to look at that extreme edge, and they're yelling at you and saying horrible things and that you should go to hell, and they mean it, and they feel so much. It's hard not to be like, those people are crazy.
Right.
Those force feed trainers have screws loose. And some of them probably do, but a lot of us have bought into a culture where we actually never just stopped and stood back and looked at the dog. And it was a comment somebody made that really brought this home to me a couple of years ago in a group, where she said, well, I'm a groomer, I'm force free. This doodle came in every day, totally out of control dog.
Whoa, how do you do that? How do you do that? Like no tether or anything?
Yeah, I was like, what's the groomer?
No, the groomer, I didn't ask, but basically force free.
Maybe with her own dogs or something?
No, well, I think a lot of us call ourselves force free, and we're not as force free as you think we are.
Yeah.
Like, I will say, shut up to my dogs. I have no qualms about that.
Yeah.
I don't think that knocks me out of the force free camp. They might, but I don't accept their label removal. I'm keeping my crown. So this lady said this dog got sent to board and train, and it was, I think, a rough board and train. And she said, and the dog came back subdued. She said, but you know what? That dog's quality of life improved because it was no longer knocking over the owners. Yeah, it was not a beautiful training, but somehow the dog got the message, and it allowed the dog a better quality of life. But you had to see past what happened, and you have to do your weights and balances, and you have to ask, why did it have to be that way? Right. But she was able to say, but the dog's quality of life was better. And I read that paragraph several times and I really worked it in my brain. And then I started looking more carefully at what I was seeing around me. And rather than just having a knee-jerk reaction to the tools I would see on the dog, I started looking at the dog. And that was, it was an epiphany. It sounds so stupid, doesn't it? It sounds so simple. Like, of course you look at the dog, but I wasn't. I was looking at the tools. And I really couldn't just let that go. And that's really gone now. I really am now looking at the dog.
Yeah, I don't think that sounds stupid. And I'll tell you why. Because of what you said earlier when you were talking about your husband, which was sometimes it's you don't have the opportunity to take that step back and really look at things. You're too close to be able to figure something out. And it goes both ways, right? So it's definitely something like, as I get better in dog training, I do find myself, I would say efficiency is the word. I think that's fair, right? Because I am a balanced trainer, right? I make no gripe about it. I use bronc collars, I use e-collars, I use food, I use, I have like 4,000 toys scattered across my yard right now, which I might have to pick up for. But I would say in terms of efficiency, I can get away with a lot less correction or just a lot less just directional pressure, even like management, like, just it. I hate like the frazzled kind of play, no place, no play, and they're like bringing the dog everywhere and doing the whole thing. And I'm like, yeah, if you stay less and do less, typically the dog will behave a little bit better, and it's just a little easier. And there's no need for all this extra pressure and stress, and like it stresses me out when I watch it more than than anything. So I'm one of those that I like to just kind of like tune out, but not really. I'll be working dogs with these on, and and I just want to be like low key and easy about it. And of course there are some dogs that are a little bit tougher or more stubborn or whatever the case, that they do tend to benefit from like a bit of a stronger recall or correction or something like that. But for the most part, when we talk about people that are not that willing to kind of look into the other side, I find it fascinating. Again, you bring up the culture thing, and then we kind of got into like, well, is it like the chicken or the egg? Do they learn the culture and then become this way, or are they this way then they learn the culture because one resonated? It happened one way or the other. Maybe it happens both ways, right? Then the question becomes in our heads, mine and Brent's, and really one of our biggest motivations for starting this podcast. How do we go and at least start trying to have the conversation, start trying to bridge the gap? Not everybody's going to be friends with everybody. Not everybody's going to, get along with everybody. And I guess that's fine. But how can we all at least have cordial conversations and agree on what we do agree on and disagree on what we disagree on, for the purposes of the same sort of benefit that social media gives training, right? You see these things, you can watch it in private, or you can tell everybody about it. Doesn't really matter either way. But no matter what, you can see it, agree with it to whatever extent that you do, pull what's valuable, discard what isn't, and it is a tough one.
Well, yeah. I think that is a hard question. I wanted to unravel a couple other things. I actually want to come back to that question if we can, if that's all right, unless you guys have something you guys wanted to elaborate on. No. So I wanted to talk. So I want to come back. Can we close with that question? Because I think let's unpackage this a little bit more, because I think it deserves that. So we talked about relationship to control. We talked about people tend to align with sides that already exist, that already exist within themselves, right? And so other things that we kind of, we're always arguing about is the use of aversives, right? And tools versus the use of rewards and motivation and things like that. And, having been at the other side and coming across, and still, I still use tools. At the end of the day, there always comes up, why do we use these tools, right? So why one approach versus another approach, right? And so some of the common arguments are going to be, well, time is a factor, money is a factor, owners actually having time and or money to spend with their dogs. We talk about efficiency. We talk about Sometimes using a tool can be a little bit quicker, right? But then we talk about morals and we talk about long-term benefit, right? On the R plus. I mean, elaborate, help me kind of what the counter arguments are on the R plus side, because you guys have them more fresh in your head.
I think Sarah and I might have talked about this earlier as well. When I was on TikTok, I did an exercise. I encouraged people. Mm-hmm. I said, I would like you to make your best case for either balanced or force-free trainer, but you can't take your own side. Mm-hmm. So you have to start by saying, I'm a balanced trainer, and here's what's great about force-free training, or the reverse. It was actually quite interesting. Mm-hmm. And what I discovered is that the majority of people really can't do it. They actually don't know what the benefits are. Mm-hmm. And the reason I'm a force-free trainer is because of what it gives to me to interact with another that way. It's not against tools. Most balance trainers were saying, well, force-free is kinder to the dog, and you don't have to worry about the fallout from collars and prongs. That's not why. I know how to, there's no doubt in my mind I could use those tools in a fine way. That's not the reason. I love watching the cooperation. I love seeing my dog opt in. I love in competition knowing that I haven't left anything outside the ring. So I have the same thing in training and trialing. There's that cooperative nature that I get with a dog is incredible. And having done it both ways, I can't walk away from that. But I don't think even one balanced trainer mentioned that. I don't even think they understood that that's the driver. For me, I don't know what the driver is for somebody else, but for me, that is the driver.
Right.
Not against the tools. So that would be me. I don't know, Sarah, I don't know what your thoughts are.
So mine's the same. I don't have a reason against the tools. And the more conversations I have with balance trainers, the more I wonder what my stance would be if I had to train more dogs that met a deadline. Mm-hmm. So we know that the balance trainer side of things, the efficiency is one of the driving motivations for using certain tools. Mm-hmm. I don't have that. Yes, I have to get certain behaviors with my dogs on a deadline, but generally I get to pick which dog I can train that with. And so I don't know, I'm not in that boat. I don't know what I would do in that situation, but I do know that with my training, I absolutely love coming up with some way to use what my dog loves to get what I want. Whether that's my relationship with them, whether it's something else that they want, but I love being able to figure out that communication system and being able to really, really get to know my dog that way. So yeah, you don't want to do this thing. Cool. Well, what do I have to do to make it so that you do want to do this and not just
how can I
want to do it, but love
you to
do it?
How can
That's true. Hey, we already said I like control things.
Yeah, that's right.
Coming back, right?
I have
tell your husband I said hello.
I have a question for both of you. Would you mind maybe run me through just a quick example, if you could? How I understand that ideal and I respect it. How would you get an owner on board with that? Like, what if an owner is like, well, I don't want to sit here all day and figure out what
we all have our itch. We all like to scratch it,
So
go ahead, Sarah.
So coming from my realm, right? So the owners I'm dealing with are sport dog trainers. And I do have a high rate of balance trainers that come to my seminars, come to my classes because of, one, the sports I do, and two, because I'm open to that sort of thing. I will take whatever you're doing and you take whatever you like of mine and I'll help you apply it to your training. And so I think over time, it's just this building of trust and me not trying to convince somebody to do it my way, but giving them a little bit here, a little bit there. And eventually, what do you know? They're moving down that spectrum a little bit more. Right. And that. So I think it's building up that credibility and that trust in that relationship with them. So no, I don't have an answer with somebody just hired me and they don't know anything about dog training. And how do I convince them they're my best way? I think actually Melissa Denise had the best word for that or the best phrase for that. You have to just assume that they know what you're talking about and just go in with that
who
idea
is this?
that
Melissa who?
Melissa Bro.
B-R.
B-R-E-A-U.
She works at the school.
B-R-E-A-U.
She's a marketing.
Cool.
Sorry. She's a dog trainer too.
We like to research people.
Yeah,
there you go.
But she really came into it because I was saying, well, how do I tell these people dock diving like that I know what I'm talking about, because I don't go to competitions. Like I've titled my dogs and that's it, but my dogs do dock dive in shows and they have to dive within a certain amount of distance. I trained a ton of dogs to do dock diving. She's like, Sarah, you just have to assume that they know that you know what you're talking about. Like they're taking lessons from you for a reason and they want your knowledge. So why should I sit there and have to convince them that my method is the best when I could just show them that, hey, this is how we're going to do it, and then have them trust that I'm going to adapt it to their dog. So I mean, that's my take on that.
Yeah.
I think that sport pet world thing is really important to talk about. I am also a sport dog trainer. I have always trained sport dogs. So they come to me. I don't have to convince them of anything because they wanted what I had. And now I'm going to show you how to get it. And I don't remember ever talking to my clients about these matters. I just showed them how to get the behaviors. And I told them how to fix it when the dog did it wrong, which is a huge issue. Like you got to and I just trained their dogs. The pet world is so much more complicated. But so for example, today I did another podcast, one of my lives on IG, and I got asked a couple of questions in the pet dog world, which was really, very simple questions. Like, how do you handle the dog jumping up? You just throw food on the floor, right? It's not harder and it doesn't take longer, but it does mean you have to think about it a little bit different. The dog just develops the habit. I don't think in the sport world it takes longer to train a dog with positive reinforcement than compulsion. It's just a different route, but in my opinion, it's the same time frame. Where I think there are a few things, the balance trainer has a real advantage with a pet trainer on a schedule. That is a recall and loose leash walking. So if the dog will not tolerate a head halter or a front clip harness, or for whatever reason the owner doesn't want to do these things, teaching loose leash walking, like the cookie thing, step by step, is not a joke. It is a time consuming thing. You have to add in distractions. I think there's only so many people who want to play that game. And both of us sort of share this problem because a prong collar is also a management tool. So you take that off, and that also, the difference is that many people are more comfortable putting a prong collar on their dog than strapping on a harness or figuring out a head halter, right? So
which can take a day or two.
There you go. Whereas with a recall, the number one thing people want is a recall and a
recall and no pulling. Yep.
Yeah. And that actually really is it. Like the rest is negotiable. Like don't run out the door, but if I have a recall, and with an e-collar, if you can get that done to a high level of satisfaction, I can't do that anywhere near the time you can in the same time frame for the same reliability. Right. And frankly, it bothers me when the positive reinforcement or more reward-based trainers are not willing to admit that. I think the honesty factor needs to be there, and we need to just put it out there. There's no guarantees. I had a dog wearing an e-collar get hit by a car. That actually happened. Yeah. The reality is I didn't pay attention, and you must always pay attention. There's no guarantees in any training with any method. And we all need to internalize that. Like it really bugs me when people say you want 100% recall. No, doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Having said that, I can get closer to 100% with an e-collar in a short period of time than I can with a cookie in a short period of time for equal level of distraction. And it bothers me when people won't acknowledge those realities. It doesn't mean that's the way we all want to run out and do it, but I do think that's what I mean by we need to be a little more honest about what we say and what we do.
I wanted to point out a couple things, and I think maybe two of these things are olive branches in a sense. So as you were talking earlier about you don't think that things like e-collar should be sold in a Petco, and your reasons why makes sense. It's hard to argue. It's not because the tool, it's because
they don't come with instructions.
Well, they do come with instructions. Like people don't read the damn instructions.
They don't read them.
So people tend to abuse the tool, and it's not the fault of the tool, but at the same time, should they be that easily accessible? Like I hear you on that. So I think the olive branch would be, I'd be open to a situation where if somebody wants an e-collar, they had to purchase it from a trainer with training. I think that's fair. And two, frankly, a lot of fucking dog trainers need to learn how to use these tools a bit better, because I see it too often become a crutch, right? Where it's supposed to be in addition to the repetition, to the relationship, to everything else, and just another way to help cut white noise and tune the dog back in. And, because I see those delineations drawn a lot, like a cookie versus an e-collar. And I'm like, well, why not cookies and e-collar when you need it? The other olive branch then is...
it shouldn't be either or. It should be yes and
right.
Like
if
maybe somehow.
It's like if then, if the dog does it, then here's a cookie. If the dog doesn't do it, then here's the remote. And then when they get there, then here's the cookie. So the other olive branch then becomes, I don't think enough dog trainers, and this is kind of like an epiphany I had as all you guys were talking about 5-10 minutes ago. I don't think that enough dog trainers, regardless of side of the fence or whatever, appreciate is like in the pet dog world, or maybe the sport dog world too, the other hindrances that we all have on us, like the limitations of the owners, mentally, physically, whatever, relationship with each other in the household, because sometimes that, the time constraint and the stress that puts on the trainer, which then the trainer loves to just kind of roll the shit downhill, and then the stress falls onto the dog.
The developmental issues, the lack of socialization we deal with, the no socialization before 4 months,
but I'm talking about the things that people don't think about. Trainers at least you would hope understand developmental issue, lack of socialization, unresolved puppy issue, all that good stuff. They never really verbalize when they're talking, discussing methods, the time thing, the money thing, the client's like own comfort level thing, and I think that is probably the best segue that I personally have heard to have like one of these kind of conversations of like, okay, well, let's put egos and stuff like that aside and just talk like, well, what about time? What about money? What about this? What about that? So I just wanted your guys' thoughts on it. Like that was kind of my foot in the door. I mean, because again, I also hear you, Denise. It is kind of hard to argue. I don't necessarily think that like in the pet world, R+ training is slower. And nor do I disagree with you that punishers, like not appropriate, like well-timed, corrections, meaning something meant to like lessen a certain behavior, but a punisher, the way an owner punishes a dog, feels good, right? It's true. They do it and it makes them feel like justified, like you motherfucker, like you got me and then I got you back, like, 1-to-1. So, that's why I think since we talked with Sara last, it really stuck with me of like, all right, well, how can you create a more successful circumstance for the dog when the dog goes home, especially with an owner who can be a little more heavy-handed, even though you told them to slow it down or whatever the case, and and I think that is a healthy middle ground there of like maybe. Oh, and I think there's the element of in today's day, people just want everything like this, and it's frustrating because there are those trainers that, don't even get me started on the trainers that do like the 2-week, any dog, any age, any issue, any whatever, e-collar, fully off leash trained, forever guaranteed, and it's stupid, and I'm an e-collar trainer. I'm a big fan of e-collars. I've seen the benefit and all that good stuff. I use them to this day, but I think that's just dumb, and it's stuff like that I think fuels the fire.
That sets an unreasonable expectation.
And so owners get like not lazy, but they get impatient and they want it right now, and they jump the gun and they make all these mistakes, and and proper training is very different than I think what most people end up doing with it.
Right. And to add to that, or something that you reminded me of, I always talk about the mentality of dog training. We know as much about dog training as much as we know about health, which is whatever we're taught in marketing, right? Like we still don't know if it's vitamins or if it's carbs or if it's proteins or if it's the supplements. We have no clue because we're sold and told all these different things. We know but professionals, we know it's very simple. Eat moderately.
Eat real food.
Real food, exercise, and you'll be fine. Drink some water, you'll be fucking fine, right? It's simple. But the consumer, our most of our pet dog training clients, is told all this bullshit. And it's all because of marketing. It's all because someone's trying to sell you something. It's all because this person had a TV show or this person has a big following. So yeah. So
can I just throw one more thing in
confusing.
there? And then I know Denise wants to say something. So I just want to throw this last bit in so that you can comment on it too. I also noticed that with owners, a lot of owners anyway, maybe not everybody, when we talk about the marketing thing, a lot of them like want to be spoon fed almost, you know, a lot of them are like, here, help me, you know, and they don't really have that urge to necessarily learn like a trainer would, or like a trainer should, you know, so they're just like, I don't know, fix it, you know. And I think that a lot of the tools in the balance world may be like on top of sometimes faster. I would definitely say to a person, I can see why they come across as easier. Like I get it. A front clip harness doesn't seem any harder than a prong collar. Like it, you know, it draws a lot of the same benefit, right? Less pulling, less craziness, less nonsense. So I'm not sure why I feel like this is the case, but I feel like it's the case that somebody would look at the prong and be like, oh, well, that's going to be the quicker one.
Right, because we assume that punishment and force gets it done in a way that cooperation and leverage. Front clip harness is just a leverage matter. It just turns the dog around. I mean, it's a keto, right? So you just right back to that, solve the problem. You know, I actually think maybe we need to start giving owners a little more credit for being intelligent. So if you're talking to somebody about training and they say, well, you know, this can you do the 2-week thing? You say, you know, could you send your kid to school for 2 weeks and they could guarantee that after 2 weeks, the kid would know the alphabet?
Everything. Yeah.
Right. I mean, anything. We recognize that with sentient beings, we don't actually control the timeline of learning. And I think we need to maybe give people a little credit and say, well, I want you to really think about that. Do you think there's anything that someone could guarantee that they could teach you, whether you were interested in it or not, in a given time frame? And what's going to happen is some people are going to say, I don't care. I just want the dog done. But if you think about it in terms of the quality of the client you're going to have, and if you have any freedom at all, wouldn't you rather have clients who are willing to say, because when I used to do board and train here, I just charged you a certain amount of money every day. That's it. You told me what it is you wanted me to do. And I said, I'll get as far as I can. I remember I had 2 dogs in both came at the same time on the same day for a retrieve. And these were both IPO, back then, IPO dogs. And the first dog, I got the dog out of the kennel and did my thing, and put the dog away. And the second dog got the dog out of the kennel. I showed the dog the dumbbell, and he went and he ran up the hillside and he hid behind the trees. Okay, so
with the dumbbell,
without, which suggests there might have been some history that I was not told about before I got the dog. And so then the owners came back a week or 2 later, whatever. And the one dog went home and I said, this is what your dog knows. And the other person came and I said, well, I've got really good news for you. And that's your dog doesn't run away anymore when I pick up the dumbbell. Right? So
huge.
It was, you know, so I think we can start giving people some credit with the understanding that there's always going to be people who simply don't care. But like with children, we don't say, well, you know, we could put an e-collar on them and then you could walk them on busy streets. Like we don't think that way. And when I do my child analogies, I say, you know, with children, we hold their hand until they're old enough. Like we accept that it's developmentally normal to have to work with what we have. We don't force the matter through. And I think people can get that. Now, admittedly, if you've got one of those franchises down the street who can train anything, anywhere or whatever. But then I think that's when I do start saying, well, I want you to think about maybe if there's a cost associated with that approach to, and let people work it out for themselves.
Right. I definitely, so I agree with you there. And I personally, that's kind of one of my favorite things to do in training, you know, like I'm one of the people, I don't know what you would call it. I moved here a couple of years ago. I'm from LA too. That's how Brent and I know each other. And when I moved to Phoenix, I just thought it was good due diligence. I'm looking at other trainers. I'm looking at websites, reading reviews, doing all that stuff, just seeing who's around, just, you know, seeing who my peers are and getting a feel for the landscape out here. What are the owners like? And I can kind of figure that out based on what's offered around here. Right. So, and because I was new here, of course, I had no client base in Arizona. That's why I met these people that I was talking about, the 2-week thing, because I was applying for a place to work until I built a client base. Right. So I met the owners, we went over some hypotheticals because they want to know that I know what I'm talking about, you know, and they're like, well, it's e-collar, like it's pretty much e-collar every dog 2-week, regardless of anything. So they're asking me like, what would you do if X happened and you need to do Y? And I'm like, okay. And I run them through the process, the food and the this and the that. and then use this to condition that. And then I end up with e-collar, and that's how I finish out the dog. Right. And they're like, well, since we only have 2 weeks, we're going to cut out this, and this. And I'm like, no, you're not, you'll cut corners, but it'll show up later in training. I can see the deficiencies in your work based on whatever you're not doing, which is why I didn't end up working with these people. Right. So I agree with you. And I give a lot of props to, I think it's fair to give, again, props to Caesar for that. He made it okay, I think, to light a little bit of a fire under the owner's ass, because they are smart. You're right. And so if they're smart, then they, it's not a matter of blame, but what I tell people this, I feel like almost daily is I'm not interested in, because everybody loves to tear themselves down when they're dealing with like a reactive dog or whatever the case. And I tell them all the time, like, listen, I'm not interested in blame. I'm not going to say it's your fault, but it's your responsibility to fix it. And so I need you to like, kind of wake up and kind of get on board with what we're talking about. And albeit it is rare in the balance training world, you do get the few clients that you have to slow down, as in correct less intensely, or, but when you get them, and I have a dog right now who the owners, we met each other a few times, but I like them. Like, I feel like they're going to become friends even, like past clients. I tell the dad often, because he was also one who was helping me develop some stuff in the yard here, building up the facility a bit. So he was here today, and he saw his dog here, and I was like, hey, he's all excited to see him and everything. Younger dog, we're doing some work based on the type of work we're looking into and the temperament of the dog and everything like that. He's going to be an e-collar dog when the time is right. When the owners brought the dog to me, he had an e-collar on, and I'm like, what's this? And he was like, oh, for the this and the that and the this. And I'm like, whoa, you skipped all this other stuff to make training beneficial, to make it so that he's not going to be afraid of his collar and whatever the case. And so when I saw him today, I've had the dog now for like 5 days. When I saw him today, he was like, have you corrected him yet? And I'm like, yeah, no, and he was also like, so, I know we talked about like 3 weeks. Do you think it's possible to do it in 2? And I'm like, yeah, no. And I was explaining to him, I was like, listen, you have to understand. And then he gets into all the justifications as to why that question was asked. He's really smart. He picked up this super quick. He picked up that super quick. He did this super, and I'm like, yeah, I hear you. What you don't understand. And I jumped on him a little bit, I was like, so here's the deal. I have to run him through his conditioning and building and shaping behaviors. And you have to understand everything that entails. I'm not just teaching a dog to sit, lay down, and stay and everything else with food. I'm building work ethic. I'm building focus and communication. I'm building the very understandings of the relationship that if we pay attention together, we get good things out of it. Right. And it's fun for you to do it as well, because, we keep it like motivational. I want the dog to like his training, of course. Right. To him, you would think that that's rocket science. And so I was like, I have to do that. Then I have to get into the higher level distraction stuff. That's when the leash pressure is going to help me. And it's also going to help me conditioning e-collar pressure so that I can phase the leash back out. And then we got like low level modern e-collar training. Right. And then now we're working e-collar /food /social pressure and I told him, I think exactly this. I was like, listen, I love you guys. You jumped the gun. So now I got to go and find out what damage is done and what I've got to undo. And he was looking at me like, oh, okay. And I was like, so stop asking me about the 2 weeks. That's not going to, it's not going to happen. Yeah, it's not going to happen. Yeah. And I told him, like, you have to understand, as a professional, if you want my honest opinion, my job is to protect the dog, my training, your dollar, frankly, and all these different things. And if you want me to do all that stuff, I need my 3 weeks. Give me time to train this dog the way he should have been trained in the first place. But that's something that newer trainers aren't comfortable talking about, regardless of methodology. They're not comfortable asking for the time that they need.
Absolutely, because that takes confidence.
Yes,
and
you're right.
Especially if you're in your 20s and you're talking to somebody who's in their 40s or 50s. I mean, youth is a huge disadvantage in all work, I think, in all work environments. Because you have to have a lot of confidence, or you got to pretend or whatever to stand up and say, no, this is the way it's really got to be. It's very hard to do, especially for women. Young 20s women have a very hard time talking with middle-aged men who may or may not be giving them any kind of respect. It's a tough road to speak up.
Yeah, I remember even as a younger dog trainer when I was in my 20s, you know, my mentor was in his 60s, you know, 35 years dog training, and I would be like, I'm with an older guy. Can you be in this eval with me? You know, like I need that backup. I need that by association confidence. Yeah. But yeah, you just missed it. Sara, you're back. We were talking about confidence again.
I know. I was going to say something. Thank you for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers, for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
We really hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and we hope to see you back for the next one. But in the meantime, please follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Dog Trainers Podcast. Go ahead and leave a comment. Ask us any questions that you want. We would love to connect with our dog trainer communities all around the world. Take care, guys. We'll see you next time.